One of the usual questions I get when Team Affinity drops, when a bunch of new players are added to the game, people are asking me, should I use this player? Who should I replace this player with? Should I use this person over this person? A lot of questions on who people should be using on their teams. And yes, my tier list that I make, I will be continuing those when TA drops. They're good resources, really give you a gauge on types of players people like and don't like, and players that people usually do the best with. But it shouldn't be your only judgment. You shouldn't only use how I rate a player to judge your specific team and your needs. So what we're going to go through today, we're going to go through all the steps that I would follow when looking to replace players, looking to add a new player to the lineup and choose someone to replace, and go through all the steps to follow, because there should be a little method to go through when you're putting together your best team. You don't want to bench a player you're doing really well with. On the reverse, you don't want to start someone that you're sucking with and is there just for the attributes. So we're going to go through a process of what you can do to make these decisions properly, and hopefully I don't have to answer any of these questions for you guys, because you can make these decisions for yourself, because that's what it boils down to, how you do with players and what your team needs. Let's get into it. What is going on, YouTube? We are back with another video. I appreciate you all watching. It's been a busy couple of weeks for you, boy. I went to Cooperstown yesterday, so I have a massive sunburn. I look like a tomato right now, but I appreciate you all being patient. Like I said before, we're gonna be uploading a lot during Team Affinity 4 dropping. If you want to keep up with all the new stuff coming out, keep up with my recommendations on players and who I think you should be using, or just in general try to get better at MLB The Show 21, make sure you do have that sub button hit down below. Make sure, some people just maybe watching my videos and forget to hit the sub button, so make sure you already have that all done. It just helps the channel and all that. Also, you want to come hang out with me on Twitch, watch me stream this game live, grind Team Affinity, so on and so forth. Make sure you do come to the Twitch channel down below if you have any questions or things for me to answer. If you do enjoy the video, make sure you hit that thumbs up. If you enjoy it, helps get the videos out there, and I appreciate all of the support on the videos this year. But without any further ado, let's go into the discussion for today, making upgrades for players and who you should be benching and what you should be doing when deciding on who to replace on your team. So this is my God squad. I mean, I don't run like the best of all best teams, I would say. A lot of competitive players would not be using some players I use on my team on the lineup or the bench or even the rotation and pen. But again, this is why it's big. You don't want to just copy and paste someone's God squad all the time, because you may do well with some players that some people don't, and on the reverse, you may do bad with players that a lot of people do well with. Like someone was telling me that they're hitting like low 200s with Chipper Jones with a lot of at-bats. So you have to make these decisions based on how you do with players, and that's what matters the most at the end of the day. So usually when people are looking to replace players, they're going about it in one of two ways. Either they see a new player comes out and they really want to use them, so they decide who is the one player I'm gonna bench, who is the one player that I'm taking off. Or on the reverse, there's a player that you've been consistently struggling with, trying to give good at bats to, and you realize, hey, I think I should replace this guy. Who should I replace with them? Should I actually replace them, or am I just on a little bit of a slump? I'm gonna go through the methods to kind of answer these questions and the things I do in game to make these decisions for myself. And just the key thing you want to look at first is the stats. Look at the numbers and how you are performing with the player. There are usually two things I'm looking at first. Looking for your overall performance with a player, I would look at the batting average and their OPS. The OPS, you could use OPS or slugging if you have a good understanding of it. I just like using OPS because it's a good well-rounding of all of their hitting. So in case you are confused on what the stats mean, I'll quickly go through them. Batting average is the average amount of hits you get. So each at bat, Roberto Clemente averages 0.302 hits. 30.2% chance of getting a hit in each at bat based on the numbers he has performed so far. So it's a good measure of how many hits a player gets. On base percentage is the same thing as batting average, but you include walks or any other play where a player gets on base. That number will likely be slightly different. I find that you don't walk enough in Diamond Dynasty enough for me to really use on base percentage alone. So I like to just stick to batting average. Slugging percentage is the amount of total bases on average each at bat. So it's not just a hit. Doubles, triples, home runs get emphasize more. This is a measure of how much power they hit for. So like 1 total base is a single, 2 total bases are a double, 3 total bases is a triple, 4 is a home run. So instead of just counting as like one singular hit, you're adding up the total bases, dividing it by a total amount of at-bats, you get your slugging percentage, so you get a good measure. So like Roberto Clemente averages 0.635 bases per at-bat, 0.6 of a base. And I like to look at OPS because it adds up the on-base percentage in the slugging. I just like the number. It's just what I always do. And it's a good judgment on how a player overall performs. You don't want to only look at power and the amount of hits they get. You don't want to only look at that because there are some players who have high power that you would expect to hit a lot of home runs with, while some who don't have much power you would only expect to hit singles with anywho. So looking at Roberto Clemente, he's hitting 302. He's got a 934 OPS, which is solid. For many people that would be good, especially the OPS. But the best thing you want to do is look at other players in comparison and see how you do in comparison to the main parts of your team. Players I have been crushing with so far. Chipper Jones, I personally think has been my best hitter all year. He's hitting 458 and has a 1600 OPS, which is really good. And he's like the tippy top. So if I'm doing well with the player, I want to be kind of close to that. That's one thing I've learned. I want to be as close to this number as possible. I'm trying to use my best players, you know. The 900 OPS is a little far from Chipper Jones. In comparison to other players on the team, Vlad Jr. is a 1300, Schwarber is a 1500. So like these players I've also really liked and have significantly higher OPS. And players that I've been using and I definitely have liked have been guys like Mookie Betts, Miggy, and Ronald Acuna, and they have an 1100 OPS. And Mookie Betts had struggled for a bit. This man struggled and is rebounding his way up. So he's already at an 1100 OPS after being at a lower one for a while. Miguel Cabrera doesn't have many at-bats. He only has 40, and he's still doing pretty solid. I mean, it's about on par. Same with Acuna here. I've used him for a good bit, but he's been used on Legend a bit as of late. So he hasn't been as effective with his lower contact. But still, 1100 OPS is probably about like my standard. I would say 1000 to 1100 OPS is like, you're doing good enough. So I would say based on the power production he has put out, I would consider replacing him very soon here. As much as fun he is defensively, I want a bigger bat out there based on the stats. Another thing that is also worth looking at is the splits. If you're really indecisive on players, a good thing to look at would be the numbers versus the individual types of pitchers. You scroll down, you see that players have different splits. So Schwarber here, taking 400 versus righties and 439 versus lefties. And I actually platoon him. I platoon him each game, but yet he still does really well versus lefties, so I probably shouldn't even bother doing that. Look at the splits of each player. Look at the batting average of how they're performing against the same or opposite hand pitcher. Really, you want well-rounded stuff. You don't want to have a player be really good versus one side and really bad versus another. Ronald Acuna here mashes lefties, but has been not good versus righties, and most of those at bats are going to be versus righties right now. So I definitely want to say that he would even be a candidate to be replaced at some point just based off of those splits. So like a lot of times when you're looking at the numbers like this, you want to give it plenty of at bats. Like Acuna, I've gotten a good idea how I'm going to hit with them. It's been 188 at bats. That's a good enough sample size for me. Clemente, it's only been 96, and that's still somewhat comfortable. Miguel Cabrera here is an example because he only has 40 at bats. So you gotta look at his sample size. It's good enough. About 100 to 200 at bats, I think, is a good enough range for most people to make those types of decisions if you're playing the game often enough. So now that I know that I want to replace Clemente, who am I going to replace him with? How can we make this decision who I could replace with? First of all, I do have a tier list. It's a good little reference sheet to go through how I think attributes and how people feel about many of the players in the game. There are a lot of easy to obtain players in the game. There are a lot of players you may have to buy to get a hold of. So I would check out the tier list and look for that type of player that fits your individual team needs. But it shouldn't be your only thing. You gotta look at your own situation. You gotta look at what your team needs, the type of players you do well with. You look at my team, I have a lot of players with high contact, high power. They usually need like 100 contact. If I'm gonna play a lot on Legend here for a while, I would definitely be considering replacing Acuna here. When I'm looking for a replacement, I want to look for types of players that I've done well with. Do they have high contact, high power? Do they have a certain amount of contact? Do they have a certain amount of power? And Clemente here, the main reason I tried him is because he has super high contact, he's got mid to high 80s power, and good defense in the outfield. Compare him to Jackie Robinson here, he's really close. The power is just a little bit less. They're very close, and I love Jackie. He hit 1400 OPS with them, 434, which is unreal. So like, this card was very nice for me. I wanted to give Clemente a go, and that's why I gave him a go at the start, because he was a similar type of player to that, and I did well with that. If you're someone, a lot of people are like this, if you struggle with someone with lower power, maybe you don't want to consider a player like that. But I'm looking for players and things that I do well with in the past to make new decisions. Players I would consider going for, like the new Matt Kemp, for example. He's got really good contact and power versus both sides. Also, you got to look at your lineup. I have a lot of righties, and you know, maybe I could use a lefty. Maybe I consider going for Larry Walker, who is a little worse versus lefties, but if I do face a righty, I'm going to have 125 contact and power. And diamond defense in the outfield is a massive plus if you can get that. So maybe I consider going for Larry Walker and putting him out there. Maybe I go for Bryce Harper, who is a little better versus lefties, but is also a little worse defensively. So like, when I'm making this type of decision and you see my lineup is mostly righties, maybe I should get that lefty outfielder, put him out there over Clemente. It just makes more sense to balance the lineup. So you want to make sure your lineup is balanced. You want to look for things that you normally do well with, look for other players who you did well with, and maybe look for a similar type of player to add to your team. Or maybe you just have a player in your inventory the entire time. Maybe the answer for me is to just move Cunha to the left, put Trey Turner in center, and boom, maybe this is just the best lineup for me. And if you really are unsure, if you really don't know of many players, if you're looking for a good lead, a good direction to try new players and who to get, I would check out my tier list. I go through all the new players. I have to update it when TA4 drops, and we'll have all the players ranked. I'll have videos on here going through my rankings of Team Affinity, player you should get right away, and maybe then use that as a resource to help make your decision after you account for all of those things. And then with our pitchers, we're going to essentially do the same type of thing, but we're going to look at different stats. I mean, ERA is a big one, obviously, and the pitcher is doing well if they're not allowing runs. ERA is the average amount of earned runs a pitcher gives up. So the smaller the number, the better. WHIP is walks and hits per inning. Ideally, you want the least amount of ERA and WHIP, but ERA is probably the end-all thing you want to look at, because if you're not allowing runs with them at the end of the day, that's all that matters. Things you want to look at with pitchers. One thing that I think a lot of people forget is that there are certain types of pitchers that many people do well with, but also there are certain archetypes of pitchers based on the type of velocity and break they have. Like, for example, Felix Hernandez, he has that meta pitch mix with the sinker cutter, but he doesn't have crazy velocity. It's all about his control and having the break on those pitches. James Paxton, again, not crazy velocity. He has that meta pitch mix, and again, a lot of it's on the break of his stuff. Al Leiter, not much velocity, a lot on his control. On the other hand, you get guys like Nolan Ryan, who do have high velocity, not as much control, just have a lot of break in their stuff, but not as much control on it. And you really just have really good velocity and different speed differentials. Same with Jacob deGrom. He actually has pretty good control. The velocity is really what takes his card over the top. So with pitchers, almost like with hitters, there are different types of hitters. Find a type of pitcher that you like. If you like one pitcher like Felix Hernandez, for example, you probably like Al Leiter. He's just like a lefty type. If you like someone who has the type of control stuff, get someone like Lance Lynn again, who has that same type of stuff. Cliff Lee, those type of pitchers, like, they're pretty common. You get a whole rotation basically of those types of pitchers if you like them. If you like Jacob deGrom, you may like Shohei Ohtani, you may like Lefty Grove, who has more velocity. Look for pitchers that play well, but also fit your type of repertoire and what you do the best with. Everyone is different, and you got to find what type of pitchers you like. You know, a lot of people love Edward Cabrera. While I thought he was solid, I didn't love him as much as many. If you like this type of thing, you know, go for the high velo type dudes. Almost like with hitting, not everyone does the best with every hitter. It's almost like that with pitchers. A lot of people forget that. There's a preferential type thing. There are pitchers that a lot of people do well that you suck with, Goose Gossage. And then some that a lot of people do really not good with that you somehow do well with, like Dellin Betances for me. Do the same type of thing, but look at ERA and WHIP especially. Maybe look at the matchups as well. Look at how what they do versus righties and lefties on the mound. Look at how many at-bats they have, how many hits they've given up versus each hand, the batting average, and like, that's a key thing you're going to want to look at. Look at how you do with a pitcher. But that is going to be it. I hope you enjoy. This will hopefully be a good little method and thing to do with the upcoming Team Affinity drop. Teams are going to start to really shift and metas are going to start to change. We'll be back again with videos throughout the weekend, going through Team Affinity and all of those things, giving recommendations and tips based on all of those things. So make sure you are subbed down below. And if you like the video, make sure you hit that like button. But you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll see you all again in the next one. Deuces.